But, you know, trying to, you know, sometimes you just...
You can't beat people over the head with a hammer, so I just try to lead by example.
Exactly. And Dennis, how do you feel about it? What do you think that people need to be doing today?
Well, I think they need to be made more aware that it's still killing people. I too give lectures, and I talk to students at one of the local community colleges. For about 9 years now, I've been doing that, and it's an AIDS class, in the psychology department. And these students are often, you see the shock on their faces when I explain to them the numbers of people that are still dying today from HIV and AIDS. And so what I do is I try to scare them a little bit, actually, by telling them my story and explaining what happened and the nightmare of it. I see the looks on their faces. I mean, some of them are in tears by the time I get through talking. And, you know, they're just imagining themselves going through it. So what I try to impress upon these younger people is to jealously guard their HIV negative status if they're not positive already, and if they are positive, to protect others and not trust anybody, because in the heat of the moment, especially if there's alcohol or other drugs involved, and you know, first feelings of love especially, people will justify taking a chance, and that's when you're exposing yourself to the possibility of becoming infected. So I really try to make an impression on them, and I tell them that, well, I'm writing a book about what has happened, and my working title is Lost Voices. Okay, all these hundreds of people that I knew no longer have a voice. They're not able to speak anymore, and that could become your voice if you're not careful. You know, you could lose the ability to speak anymore. In other words, you lose your life. Mm-hmm. And so I think that people like me and like Nevin and like Dr. Schouten and others who have seen what's gone on and have survived all of this, it's important for us to stand up and speak up, because we can still carry the message to let other people know that you need to be careful and jealously guard your negative status if you're negative.
Well, go ahead.
I have 3 picture books from the 80s and I go into the 90s, and I'm the only person who's still living. Mm-hmm. And my best friend, who was a survivor for 19 years, he passed away 2 years ago.
Well, I think one thing that's also important to keep in mind is that we continue to have 40,000 new infections a year in the United States. That's an awful lot of people becoming HIV positive from a disease that's preventable, but we have a federal government that prioritizes abstinence only, research intervention that's been shown not to be an effective intervention. We don't prioritize prevention. We don't use evidence-based methods to fund those programs, and there's reasons that there's more resources that need to be addressed around prevention.
Well, I think so, too. I was reading a story today, actually, on the news, you know, on the Internet, about that exact thing. It was a big story on this, so I decided to spend 5 minutes and read it. And in that story, it was talking about sexual relations among teenagers, high school, junior high, all the way down to actual education in elementary school, that the program, although it is well funded by the current administration, it isn't working. But yet still, you know, money is still being pumped into that bottomless pit, and it's still not working. It's not doing a thing. So I think it is important for people to protect yourself and others.
Well, go ahead. In TV shows and your movies, everybody's having sex, left, right, and sideways, and without any commitment, there's no mention of protection anymore. They used to. In the movies on TV, they would break out the condoms, but now that's just not.
Well, looking back in history, though, was there something more that could have been done?
We was dealing with a virus that nobody knew anything about, and the virus is still a mystery today.
And Doctor, what do you think about it?
Well, like I said, I think that maybe having an administration that reacted more aggressively in the early 80s might have moved things along quicker, because clearly over the 15 years, we did make significant progress. And whether or not more resources, more prioritization would have hastened that research, we don't know, and we'll never know. But clearly, once advances started to be made, those advances were built upon quickly. But it took a long time for those initial steps to be made.
Well, I know that we're up and coming here pretty quick on a new presidential election and things, but do you think that should be or needs to be a paramount issue in the upcoming election as to how are they going to deal with the HIV and AIDS crisis? How are they going to deal with funding for research, present, the education for it? Would that, in your own mind, would you guys think that that's something that is just standing out there?
Well, I think it is, and there's the coalition of almost all major AIDS service organizations, AIDS advocacy organizations in the country have created a letter that almost every organization has signed on to and sent it to all the candidates with an AIDS agenda for the next administration. And I think that part of that agenda is universal health care, though. I think that part of the issue is access to care. These drugs are phenomenally expensive. We haven't talked about that yet, but
right.
$15,000, $20,000 a year for the simplest regimen. Mm-hmm. And part of that agenda needs to be access to health care for everyone.
Well, it's sort of a funny statement, but one of the candidates that are running, we're not going to talk too much about politics here, folks, but one of the candidates that are running decided in his city, and I'll say what he did, and you'll probably know who it is, stood out on the street corner in a dress. And Steve, our director, his mom said, well, this candidate, named him by name, this candidate, is affirming to gay people. And Stevie said, why do you say that? And she said, why else would he be standing out in the middle of Broadway, whoops, in a dress? Why would he do this? And Stevie said that does not mean that he is, happy-go-lucky with gay folks. That does not mean that. But I do think that in the new election, the Congress, the House, the Senate, all of these folks, that more money does need to be placed in on this. More education does need to be done on it. But where does it begin?
Well, we've seen our prevention funding be cut back. At our AIDS clinical trials unit here in Seattle, we had a significant cut in funding last year, which has decreased the ability of us to do the amount of research studies that we had been doing, and this is a cut across the board in all the AIDS research networks around the country. So where to begin is to dedicate more resources where they'll be more efficiently used than where we're currently dedicating our federal resources.
Well, I think it's important to have as much money as it could possibly swallow in order to get the job done.
Yes, and there's a lot of people out there who don't have insurance, don't have no way of getting medications, and these people are dying off fast because the programs are being slashed for help, for them to get medication and stay healthy.
And Dennis?
Well, yeah, we definitely need to refund the programs that have been cut to a higher level than they were before. So I think that the priorities of our country are off kilter right now, and I don't stand alone in that attitude. I think a lot of Americans believe that. And one of the areas we could fine-tune our country back to a more proper stance would be in universal health care. What Dr. Shelton said, I think, is right on. That would help a lot, a whole lot.
Well, I think that Canada did a wonderful thing when they did what they did with their health care.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome. There's so much going on back and forth, pharmaceutical companies to insurance companies to states, with medical coupons or medical coverage for the poor and the disabled. It's totally red tape what you have to jump through in this country in order to get the top-notch care that your senators and your legislatures and your presidents are getting. So why not extend that same type coverage? I think that the war against HIV and AIDS, it hasn't ended, has it?
No, definitely not. Yeah.
It's still an issue. It's still a problem, and people are still dying from it, or they're getting sick from the side effects from the medications.
What has, as far as you were, Doctor, you were talking about cuts in the funding for the research.